যদি সবাই ফিরে যায়, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায়, যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায়, তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। যদি আলো না ধরে, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো রে।
Hello guys, thank you for joining the live stream. Today we have back with us for the third time and 2 days in a row Professor Salvatore Babones. Thank you so much, sir, for joining again.
Great to be here.
We had a lot of pending questions. A lot of people were asking many questions, but yesterday, admittedly, deliberately, the priority was my questions first, then the members' questions, then the live chat questions. Today, the priority will be anybody who asks a question. But until people start asking questions, I have, again, countless questions myself. But today, the priority won't be my questions. So, sir, firstly, these are my pending questions from yesterday, which is, if you are crediting Hindu civil society with keeping Indian democracy in check or in shape or sustaining it, then why are you saying that it's not the credit of Hinduism per se? It's a very, very subtle difference. Could you elaborate on it?
It's a subtle difference, seems to be lost on people, but the issue is not the religion of the civil society, it's the location of the civil society. Nepal has a Hindu majority country, but it hasn't sustained a democracy. What Hindu civil society did, in particular, what Hindu reform movements did, and we could think of, going all the way back to, Dayananda Saraswati and the creation of the Arya Samaj, but then after that, the Brahmos tried to do the same thing, and the Ramakrishna Mission tried to do the same thing, and in a later era, the RSS tried to do it, which is they all tried to unite Hindus across India into a single community. They did not include Hindus in Nepal in that community. They were uniting Hindus across India into a single community, with the effect that instead of breaking up at independence, India remained a single nation. The real threat to democracy in countries is not a dictator. This whole narrative that we get from the Yale professors and the Anne Applebaums of the world of a slow descent into democracy, into autocracy. This slow deterioration of democracy has never actually occurred anywhere in the history of democracy. No well-institutionalized democracy has ever had a slide into dictatorship. They talk endlessly about Weimar Germany. Weimar Germany was a semi-democracy for 10 years, continually facing coups and revolutions that never pulled together as a country, and then Hitler took power. The real problem for democracy is that there's no united nation on which it can rest. And so the book takes what we would call in social science a very Durkheimian approach to the understanding of democracy instead of a Weberian approach. It's based on the idea that you need a unified nation to have a democracy. If you look across third world countries post-independence, every one of them that I know the detailed history of, the democracy falls apart based on tribal or identitarian lines, religious lines. In some sense, there's a fault line in society. And the easiest way for Indians to see this is just to look at Pakistan. Look left, right at either Pakistan. The fact is Pakistan could never survive as a democracy because the Punjabis and the Sindhis were never going to let Bengalis run the country.
Yeah.
And so when they had an election, all the Bengalis voted for a Bengali party, all the Punjabis voted for a Punjabi party. And because the Punjabis controlled the military, they repressed the Bengalis, right? The country never had a unified national identity with parties that cut across the entire country. Now, India was saved from that fate to some extent by the Congress Party, credit where credit is due, but Congress didn't really create the unified sense of India as a nation. That unified sense of India as a nation was created by a series of nation builders who educated people across the entire country that they had something in common. The Hindu faith unified India in a way that linguistic nationalism could easily have divided India, right? So why do we have an India instead of an independent Bengal, a Maharashtra, independent Tamil Nadu, and an independent Kerala? Why is there a single country called India? It's not because of the British. I mean, the British created a unified Pakistan as well. The British did created countries in Africa also. There's a unified India because throughout the period, especially the period 1900 to 1940, but going back to the beginning of the 19th century, Hindu reformers were trying to tell Indian Hindus that they were Hindus. That is, Shiva worshippers and Krishna worshippers and Ganesh worshippers, or worshippers of this local temple in this one place, but in fact that they had things in common with other Hindus throughout the whole continent. And that creation of a nationhood, the idea that people's identity was Hindu, as opposed to people's identity being Maharashtrian or Bengali, is what created a unified India, so that when India became a democracy, it didn't then splinter at the first election along identitarian lines. Now, you asked me yesterday about, does identitarianism threaten democracy? And absolutely it does. If all of India were to go the identitarian route, then yes, India would split up. But a sufficient number of Indians feel they belong to a single national community. And for good or for bad, or I should say, for good and for bad, that sense of national community is a Hindu national community, which of course bears in it the problem of what role for Muslims or Christians, or in an earlier age, Sikhs in this national community. And you can see this process happening even post 1984 with Sikhs. So, the whole idea, like we often hear now that Sikhism is a Dharmic religion. Well, why do we have that language now? We didn't have that language 40, 50 years ago. That language seeks to bind Sikhs into a larger community rather than allow the sense of separateness that Sikhs should go their own way because they don't belong in this community.
Now, sir, like a true maverick, honest academic, I think you have managed to piss everyone off with this with the book. And I noticed that Congress supporters could just as well feel happy with the book, because it almost seems that you are crediting the Congress era and the Congress, therefore, by extension, the Congress party with crediting them with keeping India united as well. So is that a fair assessment?
I think Congress had the right idea but the wrong tactics. And I'm very critical in the book of the composite culture thesis. So the program under Nehru and Nehruvian historians was to create this idea of a composite culture, that India is a single culture that brings together Muslims and Hindus in a unified project. And the problem with that composite culture thesis was that it just wasn't, it didn't have enough basis in reality. It was too artificial. It wasn't genuine to people. And when you try to tell people that, no, Aurangzeb was actually a great guy, he loved music, and he didn't do anything wrong. It's like, well, you can just go to Varanasi and you can see the temple underneath the mosque, or you can go to the Babri Masjid and you know that Babur was not a unifying leader. Babur was a Muslim conqueror. And so I think that their project, while correct in spirit, was just never likely to succeed in execution because transparently, Baber was not someone who sought to unify India in a spirit of love and cooperation. He was a bloodthirsty conqueror, right? And so the narrative couldn't take hold.
Then why so many nationalist sounding, almost seemingly nationalist Hindu reformist movements in India, not in Nepal? Is it then a credit of the British Enlightenment era education system which fused with Hindu ideas and therefore those reforms happened in India, not in Nepal?
I don't know. Honestly, I haven't studied Nepal. The interesting contrast with Nepal is, of course, that Nepal was never fully colonized. And so
therefore the lack of British education fusing with the Hindu society probably.
So I don't know is the simple answer to that. And Nepal has a separate history. Nepal is not a post-colonial society that managed to survive as a democracy. It was a post-colonial non-democracy that was late to adopt democratic institutions. So its entire trajectory was different. Now, why Hindu reformers did not particularly reach out to Nepal in the way they reached out to princely states within India. I mean, there were strong efforts to incorporate princely states into this unified Indian whole. My general impression, and again, my knowledge of history with Nepal just becomes a little too weak here. My general impression is that they did not make a strong effort to integrate Nepal into those networks. Maybe they did, and I'm just not well enough educated on it. I mean, but in any case, Nepal is not a post-colonial democracy that survived its first and second crises. Nepal is simply not a post-colonial state. India had the same kind of post-democratic history as other post-colonial countries, where, I mean, it's a bog standard history of post-colonial states that whoever ran that all of them had big tent umbrella national liberation movements like the INC, that whoever was running that movement at the time of independence inevitably seized control of it and governed as a dictator, using his control of that big tent movement. And that's why the moment in India where Gandhi said, oh, it's time to disband the Congress, because obviously it's performed its function. And Nehru's like, no, we're not disbanding as we,
I didn't know about that. I found out about it from your book. I didn't know.
I mean, it's well known it's well known to nationalist historians. I mean, it's not something it's something that's viewed as a BJP or RSS historian's point, but it's well documented. It's right there in the collective works of Mahatma Gandhi. It's not unknown. It's just something that historians just didn't want to teach Indians because it didn't fit their narrative. But it's right there in the documentary evidence. It's not a conspiracy theory or something. And the assumption was that Gandhi's assumption was that, okay, we've served our purpose as a national liberation movement. Now it's time for normal politics. And Nehru, like leaders all across the third world, given an opportunity to seize power, seized power. But India got through the crisis of Nehru's death, which in other countries, civil wars often broke out. It happened in Pakistan right away. If Jinnah had lived, Pakistan may have had a peaceful 10 or 20 years. Jinnah's death immediately after independence plunged Pakistan into a disorder that it still hasn't recovered from. So India got through the first crisis, the death of Nehru, and then it got through its second crisis, the conversion of democracy into dictatorship by Indira. And it got through those two crises because it had a strong, horizontally organized civil society that simply didn't accept the transition away from democracy by either leader.
Sir, I'm still very interested in finding out the why of it. Why did it happen in India and not in Nepal? Because clearly all of the nationalists, whether atheists or Hindus or Hindu reformers, were very, very educated in the British system. Are you ready to not give any credit at all to the British education system?
I don't give credit.
There is one other difference with the Mughal Empire, because they were as colonizers as the British. They were as oppressive, if not more, than the British. And both did did great architecture incidentally, but nobody stood up in arms and united and banded together in a language of freedom and independence throughout the Mughals. But they did for the British. I guess the British gave them a lexicon of unity and freedom, independence, and that charged people up. It backfired. The education backfired on the British.
Look, if you want to give the British credit for politically unifying in India that otherwise may never have been unified,
no, credit for educating them in such a way that they thought of uniting and getting freedom.
But the British education, no. I mean, Ghana had British education, Nigeria had British education, Kenya had British education.
Then they didn't have
Sri Lanka
Hinduism.
had British education. I mean, the most parallel case, if you don't want to look at Pakistan, maybe Sri Lanka, which was also a British colony, which was more prosperous than India, which naturally should have been part of India. I mean, when Vivekananda landed from return from America, where did he give his speech saying, I'm grateful to be back on Indian soil? He gave that speech in Colombo. So I mean, Sri Lanka would be India, except for the accident of history that it was run as a crown colony, not as a company colony. Well, look at Sri Lanka. It had greater advantages. Levels of education were higher under British colonialism in Sri Lanka. They remained higher, all throughout the independence period as well. And yet, Sri Lanka had and has a very troubled history of a lack of an integrated society in Sri Lanka, with this division between, the native Buddhists, the native Hindus, and the migrant labor Tamils, in Sri Lanka, dividing the polity and never coalescing into a single democratic nation. So they've had democratic governments on and off, but there has historically been a lack of a common sense of nationhood. That's been the challenge. And that common sense of nationhood was not created by the Hindu faith in India. It was created by Hindus. In the same way that American nationhood was created by Christians. It wasn't created in the Christian faith. It wasn't their faith that made it, but it was Christians who did it. Now, in India, it's specifically Hindu in character, whereas in America and in Western Europe, it was specifically anti-Christian in character. I mean, these were post-Christians, if you will. But nonetheless, it was Hindus, not Hinduism, that united India.
Then are you rejecting the today's common trope of America being founded on Judeo-Christian values?
Oh yeah, that's ridiculous. I mean, first of all, there's nothing Judeo about it. America has only been founded on Judeo-Christian values since 1973. Before that, it was Christian values, and now we say Judeo-Christian values because Israel has been, brought into maybe since 1948 or 49 after the Holocaust. When Jewish issues became prominent in America. But no, America is not particularly founded on Christian values. There's a vague Christianness to America, but there's no inspiration from any Bible scriptures in the Declaration of Independence. And I've even had this discussion with people who want to find religious foundations of Western individualism and Western democracy, and I point out to them that Russians are Christians. Why don't those Christian values hold in Russia? If anything, Russians are better Christians than Americans are. Italians are Christians.
Africa, half of Africa is Christian.
Yeah, and then if you start saying, well, it's Protestant Christian values, then you start saying, well, democracy arose in the U.S., but Protestants in England were quite comfortable being monarchists. It just goes nowhere. It was in spite of the Christianity, not because of the Christianity.
So was Max Weber wrong as well for crediting Protestantism?
Yeah, Max Weber is absolutely wrong. The whole idea that, in the broad outline of the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism, the fact is that the most prosperous capitalistic areas he should have known better, even most Protestant capitalistic areas of Germany in his day were Bavaria and Franconia, and Cologne, the Rhine Valley, the most Catholic areas of Germany. So he considered Germany a Protestant country, but it wasn't. I mean, Germany, 40% a Catholic country, 60% a Protestant country, and the Catholic areas were the rich capitalist areas. In Italy, northern Italy is Catholic and prosperous, southern Italy is Catholic and poor. I mean, it's just no. There's no relationship underlying Max Weber's claims in the broad sense. Again, I'm not a Weber expert, but then I'm not really a big Weber fan.
Okay. Now we will take audience questions. Just one last follow-up on this. Then please give me one last why. Is there any why to this? Why or how could Indians do it, or Indian Hindus do it, and nobody else, and Americans without Christianity?
That's actually a really good question. Why alone among developing countries did India solidify a nation? And I think, look, I don't know why India's proto-independence generations, I think you have to go back before the generation of the 1930s and 40s and go back to the 1890s, 1900s, 1910s, all of these debates in pan-Indian outlets. And here's, if you want to talk about the influence of the British, it may just be that they had a unified English language within which to have these debates, because the journalism, but the journalism wasn't all in English. Much of it was in Hindi and Gujarati and Marathi and Bengali. So there's a lot of this was written in languages other than English. So I'm not even sure that the Englishness is what connected it. I mean, it might have been them rising to the challenge of being divided by colonialism. Honestly, I don't know the political psychology of what drove these men to attempt to create a unified whole out of India. I mean, part of it was Islamophobia. I mean, so the founding of the RSS is clearly grounded in fear of political Islam. The founding of Savarkar's Hindu Mahasabha was clearly grounded in fear of political Islam and violent political Islam. A lot of this comes out of the Mopila uprising in Malabar. But the efforts at creating a unified Hindu India really date before that. I mean, why did Vivekananda have an India-wide ministry instead of a Bengali ministry? There was plenty of work to do in Bengal, right? He couldn't say, well, I have so much extra time that I don't just want to solve the problems of Bengal. I want to solve. But why did he see himself as a citizen of India, not as a citizen of Bengal? I don't really know, and I just don't know the answer to that. I can see that what happened is due to the work that people like him and Bipin Chandra Pal and Sri Aurobindo, the work that these people did. But why they did it, that's something for, I guess, for Indian historians to look to. I mean, for me, the puzzle was, where do I find the answer to India's late 20th century success? And, I can take it back to the documentary evidence of the 1910s and 20s. Where it originates before that is lost for me in local literatures, non-English sources, much more obscure sources. I don't have the historical and local language knowledge to do that study. Maybe someone should take it up.
Have you read anything about, have you truly researched in the caste situation of India?
Yeah, I've done a lot of work on caste. And actually, my next big research project is a sociology of Sanatana Dharma, a response to Weber's sociology of Indian religions. And a lot of these movements that were originated as Hindu reform movements that were opposed to caste divisions. And that's true of going all the way back to the Arya Samaj, which was a anti-caste movement, through Savarkar and so a lot of these movements have their origins in opposing caste-based differences. And this is like Western. I mean, whenever I read in Western sources that the BJP is a caste-based party, I just hang my head and I think, you haven't read anything. You just, even the basics. You're just accepting opposition propaganda. as
Yeah.
reality. I mean, there are many reasons to hate the BJP or to
Yeah.
oppose them or to dislike them,
Yeah.
but to dislike them because they're in favor of caste oppression is absolutely ridiculous. And people say, well, it's mainly a Brahmin Banya party, and it's like, well, who runs the INC? Who runs the Communist Party? I mean,
Exactly.
inevitably, whoever's running any old established political party in India is going to have Brahmin and
Right.
upper caste origins.
Yeah, I asked this because the nationalist moderates were all upper caste, mostly Brahmins. Nationalist radicals were upper caste, mostly Brahmins. Even the nationalist those reformers were mostly upper caste, mostly Brahmins. So were they redirecting their caste supremacy, or let's say caste pride energies, into uniting India, and they would not take
No, I
this
think
dependence
there's
lying
no
down?
reason. There's no reason to doubt they were genuine reformers. I mean, the leaders of the American Revolution in Virginia were all slave owners. Well, it's
Right.
not because they were ideologically committed to slavery that they became leaders. It's because, well, who else is going to lead the state? Obviously, the richest, best educated people are going to
Of
be the
course.
ones who run things. And
Of course.
and the fact they were slave owners is coincidental to that. It's just, of course, rich and well-educated people dominate every social movement, including communist parties the world over. Irony of ironies, including, I think you've pointed out, in West Bengal.
Yeah.
Communist parties, of course, are run by upper caste Indians or by rich, highly educated Westerners. A communist is much more likely to come from Harvard than from Kennesaw State University. It's just inevitable. Leaders of every political party are more likely to come from Harvard than from Kennesaw State University.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I'm wondering if I'm trying to differentiate between Sri Lanka, India, and Nepal. So Nepal and Sri Lanka were not very Brahmin heavy in their leadership, right? And India was. So were the Brahmins redirecting their energies of hating Shudras in the past to hating the British? And they thought that, no, we are proud and we want not going to take this lightly.
I'm skeptical of that, but I don't have the answer. I think that's an unlikely psychological mechanism, but
right. Okay.
I don't have an answer to that.
Please try someday write a book on this, about the why of this. Okay. Is liberty and democracy really the same? You can say India has democracy since 75 years, but we still don't have freedom of speech and expression, and definitely not free markets.
No, liberty and democracy are obviously not the same thing. I like to ask students the question, which would they prefer, freedom or democracy? And say, both. And it's like, well, but what if you have to choose? And to my dismay, most choose freedom, even without democracy. And I'm much more committed to the idea that, well, even if I dislike the democracy I live in, and frankly, if you go back and read between the lines of Plato's Apology, the story of the death of Socrates, I think that was Socrates' message. That is, he submitted himself to the judgment of Athens, even if it meant that he was going to be put to death unfairly, because, well, if that's what the people have decided, that's what you have to accept in a democracy. That's my reading of Socrates. It's a very minority, heterodox reading of Socrates. But no, they're not the same thing. But democracies, empirically speaking, pretty good at maintaining liberties. There aren't a lot of non-democracies that stay liberal. I mean, you can, the classic example was the Enlightenment of Frederick the Great's Prussia, but don't look to Prussian militarism to maintain your individual liberties.
Right. Okay. Where'd the question go? Okay. In your view, is diversity and non-standardization a defense mechanism against invaders, or more than that? Have we been intentionally ungovernable in large swaths of history and geography?
I'm not sure I quite understand the question. I'm not sure why diversity would be a defense against invaders. If anything, being united would be a defense against invaders.
I know why he's asking this.
Yeah, go ahead,
because we have a recurring theme in our discussions that because we were so diverse, you couldn't kill one leader and decimate the entire society.
Look, but that's not a conscious strategy, right? I mean, no one sat down and say, let's not have a common leader. And no, look, India is just, Look, India did not have to become India.
Exactly.
India is sufficiently diverse that it could have become, like Western Europe, a series of 25
Right.
separate, in India's, 34 separate countries. There's no reason India had to be India. India was created. It was created by
Right.
people in the 19th century, Indians, not British people, who insisted that the India should be united as a single community. And those people who did all the work uniting India were Hindus. And that's why I say India is a Hindu nation running a secular state. Obviously, Muslim Indians were not working to create a unified India. They were trying to grab power in Muslim majority areas for themselves. That diversity very well could have led, instead of talking about a diverse India, we could be talking about 34 homogeneous small countries, like Nepal, like Bhutan. That very well could have happened. So I don't think it was something that was preordained or had to be. India was created. It didn't pre-exist the British and pre-exist the Mughals. It's something that was created in the modern world.
Yeah. This is a weird question to ask to you, but go for it anyway. How can the young generation create more pan-India cohesion?
I think this is something I was saying yesterday that was so controversial that people have to consciously attempt to bring others in, to reach out to others and in the organizations they're in to seek inclusivity. When you notice, so I was talking, I was invited to the RSS at 100 celebrations in Bangalore in November. And I met lots of RSS Swayamsevaks, and we're talking about Muslim outreach, and they were very happy to have a Muslim what is it called, the Muslim Rashtriya Manch, the separate Muslim organization. I said, well, look, you have a shaka with 12 people coming every morning or once a week. Why don't you ask a Muslim neighbor to come to your shaka? It's like, no, they have their areas. We have. I said, well, then you're not really an inclusive organization, are you? So if you're in the RSS and you have a weekly shaka, bring Muslim. If you're true to that ideology that every Indian is a Bharatiya, and it doesn't matter as long as you're faithful to this country, you could invite a Muslim neighbor into your group. And if you're not in the RSS and you have other groups you're involved in, bring a Muslim neighbor in, bring a Christian neighbor in, make it an inclusive group bit by bit. And ultimately that's how people feel included and tied into the society. If people feel tied in, they may not, it's just like a family. You may hate your brother, but he's still your brother. Now, if you don't know the person, you can hate someone and be violent towards him. But if someone's part of your family, part of your friendship networks, ultimately you work out problems. And in very practical terms, I'm not a religious leader. I'm a practical social scientist. Let's think about one of the very common flashpoints in India: processions, Hindu processions in front of mosques, and then Muslim calls to prayer in front of, Hindu temples, this sort of thing. Well, if people knew each other socially, they'd say, hey, could you be quiet when you pass this area? We'd really appreciate it. And, could you do this? And, you're going to do the call to prayer at 5:30 in the morning. Do you need to use the loudspeaker, or could you just give an audible call to prayer? It satisfies the religious obligation to just, there's no Quranic obligation to use a loudspeaker. There is no Puranic obligation to dance in front of a mosque, right? And if people if they know each other, if the community leaders, instead of community leaders interacting at the peak level, the representative of the Muslim community discusses with the representative of the Hindu community. If instead there's horizontal integration, which is the point of I mean, that's what the RSS has successfully done in Hindu civil society. Not just the RSS. I mean, that's what the Ramakrishna Mission has done in Hindu civil society is create these horizontal peer-to-peer linkages that tie society together. That's what's missing with Muslim and Christian Indians, are those ties in to Hindu society, and that's something people can do.
And it's not like the horizontal integration isn't there at all. Otherwise, we would be having riots every day, every part of the country.
Yeah, I mean, India is not in a state of civil war, but
pretty much.
It is notably lacking.
Right. As a sociologist, what is his opinion about the evolution of democracy? Is it evolving? What is the future of a democratic social construct going to look like?
I don't think it's evolved much at all, really. The U.S. set up the idea of representative democracy in the late 18th century. And with minor changes here and there, that's pretty much how democracy has worked ever since. Representative democracy with some protections for freedom of speech and freedom of organization and freedom from oppression. And you put that formula together, and one way or another, all modern democracies are basically based on that. There are these ideas for more control. So I have a colleague who talks endlessly about monitory democracy and how, you need to protect people from themselves, through the creation of technocratic institutions. Other people who want direct democracy, we could all vote on referendums. Other people who want citizens' assemblies. But all of these mechanisms have just serious and often obvious flaws that they end up not working. I mean, I'll give you an example. My least favorite is the idea of citizens' assemblies. Oh, that sounds great. Except everyone who puts together a citizens' assembly idea has a moderator who puts business before the citizens' assembly. And it's educators who educate their citizens' assembly about it. It's like, no. If you're going to have a citizens' assembly, get 99 random people and let them do what they want. But no one's going to let them do what they want. And so, well, then it's not real anyway. I guess referendums have the best track record. There are successful democracy by referendum in Switzerland and in some U.S. states. But even those countries that have democracy by referendum have organized representative institutions that put together the referendum questions, that run the referendums. So I think modern representative democracy, as invented in the U.S. Under influence of the UK, I mean, the parliamentary system obviously came from the UK to the U.S., but representative democracy through elections, as we know it, is a U.S. invention, and it's spread to half the world at this point. And I don't see it ever going away, at least not in the human timescales on which I work, the hundreds of years. The thousands of years, I have no idea. But it's a very successful model and there are no alternative successful models.
I agree. This is not a question, but a very important comment. So I would like you to elaborate on it.
Oh,
people don't even understand what democracy
I'm
is.
sorry, Stickelmako. I get so tired of the republic and the democracy. Because Americans love it.
Please tell us what exactly
it's become a new thing in America. America is not a democracy; it's a republic. And it's like, yes, it's a republic,
constitutional
Republican democracy. Look, this is not a practical distinction. I mean, yes, historically, a republic meant a res publica, that is an entity distinct from the rule of a family or the rule of a monarch or something like that. But in practice, democratic republicanism or republican democracy, I mean, it's no coincidence that the two big parties in the U.S. are called the Republican Party and the Democratic Party because they're just synonyms for the same thing. In practice, yes, you're right. In political theory, you could distinguish them. In history, you could distinguish them. But, the Indian Republic is a democracy. The American Republic is a democracy. No, they're not Athenian ancient democracies, but they have modern democratic institutions.
No, then what is a democracy? Because like yesterday, you clarified that a lot of things that we have grown up considering to be necessary components of democracy aren't even actually, you have convinced us that they are not really necessary components of democracy. Then what
I think
prerequisites democracy?
So they are correlates of democracy, or they are maybe some of them are necessary conditions for democracy. Like freedom of speech is probably a necessary condition for what democracy is can you vote to change your government? I mean, in practice, like I'm a very pragmatic social scientist. I'm not a political theorist. I'm very impatient with political theory. What I want to do is look around the world and see, well, how do actually occurring democracies work? And the way they work is people vote and change who their leaders are. That's a democracy. If you can vote and realistically change, if you're unhappy with your leadership and you can vote it out of office, you live in a democracy.
Here's a compliment for you. It's a very interesting and deep reading of Socrates, the things you said.
And I'm sorry for making fun of you. I'm sorry for making fun of you in the last question.
Okay. Oh, where did the question go? Oh, yeah. Is parochial culture good for the best available trade-off called democracy? Though I don't agree. But do you?
What's parochial culture? Sorry. Parochial's capitalized. Tribal. Does that mean religious culture?
Yeah.
And parochial has many different meanings.
Tribalism. Maybe he can elaborate later.
Yeah, actually, Sudeep, if you could just expand the question and re-ask it, because parochial has many different meanings. You know, I'm not sure which one you mean here.
Yeah, he is live. He'll ask it again.
Okay, thanks, Sudeep.
Okay. Did Sir in his readings ever find that RSS openly issues violent threats against Muslims, Christians? If not, can we then say Nazi-Hitler comparison is a very big lie?
You can say that it's a very big lie. I wrote an article about this for the 100th anniversary of the RSS back in October, addressing explicitly the Nazi-Hitler thing and what Goldwalker said in his book. I mean, Goldwalker was writing, the only connection whatsoever between the RSS and Nazis is one sentence from Goldwalker from his bunch of thoughts, from his We, Our Nation Defined book. Now, there's some dispute of whether Goldwalker was actually the author of We, Our Nation Defined, but his name's on the cover. Let's assume he's the author. And remember, he wrote that book without knowledge of World War II, without knowledge of the Holocaust, at a time when many people, including John F. Kennedy, were admiring what Hitler was doing in Germany. And I tell Westerners, like, you know, you're trying to use gotcha statements to bring these down. And, you know, this is someone who is writing with a 1930s, who never left India in his entire life, who's reading newspaper articles about Europe at second and third hand while living in India. And, you know, people are admiring Germany because of the Autobahns, and people are admiring, you know, Germany for Hitler for unifying the German nation. He pretty much just said, oh, you know, Hitler's doing a good job of unifying the Germans, and shame about the Jews. And, you know, but this is before the Holocaust, right? Now, like, should he have been more sensitive about the, you know, prosperity? Well, in his mind, remember, Jews weren't being killed in his mind, and they weren't at the time. In his mind, oh, well, Jews will have a country in Israel. He was a Zionist, and he supported Jews having a state of their own in Israel. And in his mind, yeah, what would happen is Jews would go to Israel, Germans would be in Germany, and, you know, wouldn't that be great? Now, this is all contained in about 3 sentences, you know, of a book, right? That's the only connection. It's a very remote connection. It's a connection that was shared by many people, many reputable people in the United States and United Kingdom at the time. If we're going to forgive people like John F. Kennedy for admiring Hitler in the 1930s, I think we can look past Goldwalker, who was much less well informed. This is not someone who did a fact-finding tour of Germany and admired the brown shirts. He probably wasn't aware the brown shirts even existed, right? You know, so I think let's give him a break. Also, he's not an RSS person, but with regards to Savarkar, it's a similar issue. When Savarkar was writing Hindutva, you know, he was writing in the context of, in the 1920s and 30s, Europeans were saying that every people deserves a nation.
Yeah.
or every nation deserves a country of its own. That was the whole basis of the League of Nations. I mean, that was the whole basis of the 14 points. I mean, not for nothing did Jinnah have his 14 points because Woodrow Wilson had 14 points. And Woodrow Wilson's 14 points for the American position in World War I was that every nation would get its own country. And of course, now we think, oh, no, we really think that Kosovans and Serbians should learn to live together, in a unified state. We think that Catalans and Spaniards should learn to live peacefully together, that Israeli Arabs and Israeli Jews should learn to live together peacefully. But, our own prior generation of progressive reformers were advocating that every nation should get its own country. And so people like Salvatore and Golwalker were saying, oh, well, Woodrow Wilson said every people gets its own country. The Jews are a separate people. The Jews should get their country. The Germans should get their country. And it was on that basis that Czechoslovakia was split up. And the Sudetenland was given to Germany. Well, they were Germans, so they should go to Germany was the logic. And the annexation of Austria was accepted. Why? Well, they're Germans. They should be part of Germany. Now that logic was a Western progressive liberal logic that then after World War II, and we saw where that led everybody, Western liberal progressives said, oh, no, we don't want that anymore. Now we value, multi-ethnic societies. And it's like, well, can you blame Golwalker for accepting the leading progressive thought of his time just because we have now changed? So sorry for the long answer, but I mean, there's just nothing there about the RSS.
Yeah, you pointed this out, this particular context in the book brilliantly as well. Now, sir, just for a clarification, these clarifications are kind of out of fashion these days, but I would still like to make it that I actually do not want a genocide of Muslims. My second favorite composer is a Muslim. My favorite Indian fast bowler is a Muslim.
I'm glad you're not genocidal. That's great to hear.
My favorite MMA fighter is a Russian Muslim. But what I'm asking is, since in that handling the Muslim exclusion question, you are on the side of Swami Vivekananda and I'm on the side of Karl Popper, do you think I might end up again, just like Golwarkers and the Savarkars, unknowingly end up supporting a genocidal theory that ends up being a genocidal theory after my death?
We all do. Look, I'm not going to criticize anybody for being inappropriate, insufficiently saintly. But we should all aspire to be saintly, I would hope. Yes, you may be, but I've been called a racist. And everyone, and something I teach students, because I teach Australian social policy, and one of the most contentious issues in Australia is indigeneity. And I teach students that these indigenous settlements that they are now so eager to preserve. Students are very idealistic. We want to preserve these indigenous settlements. It's their true culture, et cetera, et cetera. Almost all of them were set up by churches, mostly Anglican churches in the 19th century and early 20th century, as settlement centers, as mission stations. And so these aren't traditional Aboriginal settlements. This is a prior progressive liberal reformers effort to reform indigenous people that you're now embarrassed by and upset by. I mean, teaching them English instead of teaching them in their own Aboriginal languages, resulting in the extinction of Aboriginal languages. It wasn't that these reformers hated Aboriginal people and wanted a genocide. They wanted to help them get better jobs.
It was a ticket out of poverty. And learning English.
A ticket out of poverty. Now, it's easy in hindsight. And that's why the final assignment I set my students, it's funny you should ask about this, will you be criticized as promoting genocide? The final assignment I set my students in Australian social policy is around indigeneity. They have to propose a reform proposal for addressing the low levels of Indigenous university attainment in Australia. And then after proposing it, they have to answer, will they be accused of genocide by a future group of students because I point out that if you take Indigenous people off their remote communities, get them engineering degrees, what's the chance you're going to go back to a remote community? They're going to marry a non-Indigenous person, settle down in Sydney, maybe go to London for a few years. They're not going to ever go back. And so are you now a genocidal person?
Right.
And it's something I ask students to think about.
Are you aware of that small period in Indian history where there were Bengali Brahmin Nazis? They were officially they identified as Nazis, and they wrote a book as well, to which the foreword was written by Savarkar's elder brother, Ganesh Damodar Savarkar.
I wasn't aware of the Bengali Nazis. I was aware that Subhash Chandra Bose went to Germany for support and died in Taiwan. And all
that was more just geopolitics thing, but there were.
I didn't know
Nazis.
I didn't know about the Nazis themselves.
Yeah, that's a hilarious era. Okay, can this technically be a long-term reversion project using inclusivity as a strategy to slowly divorce this idea of caliphate from the mind riddled with Middle Eastern colonialism?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's why I always point to the United States. I've repeatedly challenged, well, what's the one example of Muslim integration? I say, well, in America, because in America, no one cares if you're Muslim, right? It's just not an issue. You're just part of. You go to an American high school, you're on the football team. You're doing all the things American kids do. You get into rap music. And it's by becoming integrated into the community. Ultimately, Muslim American children are not dreaming of building the caliphate in America. They're dreaming of, becoming business people or professionals or sports stars, right? And it's precisely that ghettoization that allows people to take on these extremist identities. And I'll use an example from Judaism. So the biggest threat, if you will, to the long-term survival of the Jewish people is in places like the United States, where no one minds if you're Jewish. It's not a big deal, that they just intermarry. And the American Jewish community recognizes this. The biggest problem is Jewish kids marrying non-Jewish kids, because ultimately their Jewishness is being left behind. The Jewish communities that try to maintain their Jewishness very successfully are the Hasidic communities. So the extreme separatist, you have to stay within this community. You dress funny, you talk funny, you maintain Yiddish as a language. And, these communities do maintain a separateness. They're very extreme and different. But even in America, even those communities lose half their children. They have to have 8 children, because at least half their kids are just going to leave the community. And not just Jews, right. It's the same with the Amish in Pennsylvania. Amish Christians, half of them leave the community. Mormons face the same problem, that, their kids just leave the community, because there is a broad inclusivity in America across religious boundaries. Now, as long as religions stay in their separate silos, that doesn't happen. And I might note for urban Hindus, I'm repeatedly told by Hindus that, no one cares about caste anymore. No one cares about where in the country you're from. Well, yes, among an urban mobile community, is she hot is probably more important than is she Brahmin. That fosters, all those connections being created, just foster a diminution of these separate identities that threaten the unity of the nation.
Then would you not give any credit to the First and Second Amendment of the US Constitution, or the fact that there's only 1% Muslims in the entire country, in USA? Therefore, the integration and no other shenanigans.
I'm a big fan of the freedoms of the First and Second Amendments to the US Constitution, but I don't think they keep Muslims down. The thing that, look, if you go back, one of my favorite little examples to pull out is from around 19...
No, the Drom Muhammad contest cannot happen in any country in the world except USA. The Prophet Muhammad contest.
The US shows how integration can work. It doesn't work as well in Australia, because it's harder to to be accepted as Australian as it is in the US. It's much easier to become accepted as American. America is a very absorbing identity. Anyone in this chat room, if you go to America, wave a flag and say, I love USA, everyone will love you. There's no,
people are not that insecure because they have a gun at their home.
And look at Hindu American politicians, and look how they couldn't care less about India. Because one generation, and all the Indianness is gone from them, because it's an absorbing identity becoming American. So I use the example of H.G. Wells, the famous author, War of the Worlds and the Time Machine. He also wrote a lot of political books. In his day, he was just as famous, if not more famous, for his political and history books as for his science fiction. And he wrote a book called The Future in America. He went to America, I think it was 1908, if I remember right, sometime around that era. Went to America, said he'd seen the future, how the world was going to be. And he said, but there's just one threat to American democracy. And I'm not making this up. Now, I was born in Passaic, New Jersey, in a hospital, Passaic General Hospital, Passaic, New Jersey. I'm half Italian American. The Salvatore is Italian. The Babones side is Greek. Passaic County includes right next to Passaic is a manufacturing town called Paterson, New Jersey. It's now all black, but back then it was all Italian factory workers. He said the one threat to American democracy comes from Southern Italian immigrants. that these Southern Italians bringing their values of the Italian South, the corruption, the mafia, their disregard for democracy, disregard for freedom. And there were so many thousands of them pouring in to factory towns like Paterson, New Jersey. And when I read that line, I thought, this is hilarious. My mother's family's from Paterson, New Jersey, and all these towns, Paterson and Passaic, and these towns are, they're becoming enclaves of people who refuse to integrate. And all the language we hear now about Somalis in Minnesota, is this same exact language we heard about Southern Italians in New Jersey, and how he literally said they form the biggest threat to the future of, I'm going to give one to, I forgot his name. I'm sorry. I'm going to give one, but said the future of the American Republic is threatened by this. And it's like, and after, one generation later, they were all fighting the fascists in Italy. And because they spoke some Italian, they were useful in the Italian campaign. And 2 generations later, none of them spoke Italian, my mother's generation. And 3 generations later, my only connection to Italy is I like pizza, right? That's the sum total of my Italianness. And that happens to Muslims, to Hindus in the US. They can maintain their religion, but no one wants a caliphate. They want a partnership. In the law firm, or they want a big house, right? They want a Ford F-150. Who wants the caliphate when you can have a Ford F-150 or a Cybertruck? And that's the unifying nature of Americanness.
What message would you give to future generations of sociologists on how they can remain committed to rigorous academic scholarship, maintain neutrality, and avoid turning sociology into activism?
It's very difficult. You can do all that. It's just very difficult to become a sociologist. The activists are in control. And if you are completely neutral and you keep your politics hidden, you can be a conservative sociologist as long as you don't tell anybody. That is, you can be a conservative in your private life and a sociologist. But if they even find out that if they even find out that you go to church or go to temple, if you're Hindu, that would be a problem, I would think. It'd be difficult to get hired because they would view you as a religious nut, quote unquote. It's very sad. But the social sciences in general, for the most part, there are little islands here and there that aren't, but for the most part, it has become an activist field. And it's just very difficult to get started. It's a declining field. If it were a rapidly growing field, get into it. But, I would say if you want to do something, go into data science and, study the same problems from a data science standpoint instead of from a sociology standpoint. Sad, but I think that's the reality of the situation.
What kind of common point can the larger Dharmic society find with Christians and Muslims? We must establish some intersection points to even start a dialogue.
So the dialogue, and this is something that came up in a prior question, there's nothing wrong with interfaith dialogue, and it's great when, it's great when the priest and the imam and the Hindu priest, all sit down together and have a conference. That's great. I mean, I don't discourage that. That's a nice thing. It's much more important that ordinary Hindus have Muslim neighbors and patronize Muslim businesses, and that ordinary Muslims go to Hindu shops and and have Hindu friends. That integration is far more important than interfaith dialogue. And now I know it happens, and I know the younger you are, the more likely it is to happen, but it doesn't happen enough, right? We have a lot of evidence that for most Muslims in India, all their friends are Muslim. Not all, but overwhelmingly their friends are Muslim. We know from marriage data that interfaith marriage is vanishingly rare. And I had actually the copy editor on the Indian edition of my book. So you remember we're talking about Dharma democracy, but the Indian edition is called Democracy with Dharma. It's just out now, 750 rupees on Flipkart or Amazon. The copy editor, when I said that interfaith marriage is similar, she tried to change that in the book and to say, is rare, but increasingly common in urban areas, because that was her experience. And it's like, no, this is my book. The data show that it's very rare. Yes, among the class of people who work at publishing houses, the class of people who work in the publishing industry, okay, there may be interfaith marriages. Statistically, it's just extremely rare. Interfaith marriages among ordinary people, I don't mean among elites, probably would do more than anything else. Now, that's a big ask, because in India, interfaith marriage means different personal laws applying. There are big consequences of interfaith marriage, but there aren't big consequences of interfaith friendship, of working on the same company. And this is something that both Hindu and Muslim and Christian Indians can all do. They can look to hire people of different faiths into their businesses instead of going the easy route, which is hiring your friends and your friends' friends and your friends' friends' friends and keeping things, easy. You can say, oh, well, no, I want to get a Christian in my company. I want to get a couple Muslims in my, or if you're a Muslim running a Muslim company, you say, well, we need to get some Hindus in the company. And this is something that Muslim Indians don't seem to do either, right? They're a closed community. And this is why with the Waqf board reforms and the question of can Hindus sit on not on the Waqf board, but on the oversight board. And I said, of course they can, because, if you need an accountant, why can't you have a Hindu accountant? There's no Muslim accounting to be done. If you need a lawyer, why can't you have a Hindu lawyer? If you go to St. Vincent's Catholic Hospital is my local hospital down the block. There are Jewish doctors, Muslim doctors, there's no, Hindu doctors. There probably aren't very many Catholic doctors at St. Vincent's Hospital. That sort of people to people integration is probably more important for lowering the temperature and creating, again, horizontal ties in society. They're more important than going vertically to the top and the two leaders talking.
Have you seen any differences have you observed any differences in the opinions of or the worldviews of Indian converted Christians versus Anglo-Indians?
I don't have data on that. The Anglo-Indian community is hardly studied because it's a very small community. And the only data I have on Christian Indians are the Pew Research Center data, and I haven't really looked at them because I wasn't particularly studying Christians.
In my personal limited observations, since I studied in a convent, I have countless Anglo-Indian friends, and I see that they seem to be very happy to integrate into the society, but Indian Christians would rather be a little fundamentalist, Indian converted Christians.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Isn't inclusion/assimilation of Islam a global challenge and by extension an Islamic reform issue?
It is a global challenge, but it's not a global challenge for Indians. That is, if Indians can accomplish that within India, problem solved. And the fact that Iran, that in Iran, Muslim Iranians can't tolerate Christians and Jews in their country, that's not really India's problem. The fact that Nigeria is being torn apart on religious lines isn't really India's problem. Now, if I were talking to a Nigerian audience, I'd be saying the same thing, that Nigerian Christians and Muslims have to learn to live together, or they have to have a civil war. I mean, that's just, and in Nigeria, it's very close to a civil war, right? I mean, there's extreme Christian-Muslim violence in Nigeria. Yes, it's a global challenge. People who want, I have a lot of conservative friends in Australia who want to say that, Islam is the problem. And I said, well, empirically, unfortunately, that is empirically true. But it doesn't mean that we can't solve these problems locally. But yes, if you look across the world, there are serious problems of Muslim majorities being unable or unwilling to live in peaceful liberal societies with people of other faith. And when countries become majority Muslim or large minority Muslim, there is organized political Islam that attempts to repress other religions. That seems to be a near universal phenomenon. The Muslim scriptures almost call for it. I mean, the Quran, if you take the Quran literally, it almost calls for it. And I should be clear, if you take the Talmud seriously, that is the Jewish Old Testament, that calls for it as well. I mean, it's not just Islam, it's just that Islam is a global religion and Judaism is a tiny sliver of the world's population. And most Jews have learned to take their religious texts metaphorically instead of literally.
Right.
Whereas most Muslim religious leaders seem to be intent on a literal reading of the Quran, which is not consistent with peaceful life in a modern society.
Have you heard of that idea that Islam's reform time just hasn't come because they are just 1400 years old? Christianity's time came, Islam's time hasn't come. Judaism's time came for the reform.
Yeah, I kind of disagree.
We are just 500 years early into the conversation.
So Christians like to point to the Reformation as, time Christianity became more enlightened. The Reformation was associated with vicious religious violence and repression. The 30 Years' War, which destroyed a third of the population of Germany over Catholic versus Lutheran groups, because these reformations were in America, we were founded by the Puritans, right? I mean, these were people who wanted to purify religion to such an extent they were willing to accept a 50% death rate on the, chance to colonize a new world rather than have their religion infected by non-believers in England. Now, arguably, Islam is having its reformation. I mean, arguably, Wahhabism and Deobandism are Islam's reformation. I mean, arguably, the problem with Islam is that it's going through its reformation, that an older, less militant Islam of the 17th, 18th centuries, 19th century has been replaced by a puritanical reformist Islam that is attempting to purify Muslim faith and Muslim worship. And it's only after Islam gets past that will it be able to live in peace. I mean, look, let's face it, Christian countries were not able to live in peace with minorities until after World War II. I mean, just look at the Holocaust, right? Those were Christians who committed the Holocaust. So it's not like Christians have been tolerant of people of other religions in Christian majority countries. It's a very recent phenomenon that Christians have been taught. And when Hindu fundamentalists say that, the only religion that's tolerant of other faiths is Hinduism, there's a lot of truth to that. That is, we don't find evidence, going back quite a long way in history, we don't find evidence of Hindu repression and genocide of non-Hindu populations in their midst. It's just not part of the Sanatani faith. So, does Islam have a problem? Yes. But its problems are maybe similar to the problems of Christianity 100 years ago. So does that mean that within 100 years, Islam could be over those problems? I hope so.
That's one problem with Islam's reforms, because growing up, we were always taught that Sir Syed Ahmed Khan was a genius reformer. Then after growing up, I read that his reform was that, yes, don't reject English language, learn the English language, get into the British government, and then be as Islamist as possible anyway. That's the reform he did. Okay, sir, where and why did then Samuel Huntington get things wrong?
Look, I'm not a big fan of Huntington. I don't think he was a very sophisticated thinker, not just with the Clash of Civilizations, but with his work on democratic legitimacy. So in his work on legitimacy, he never understood Seymour Martin Lipset's theory of legitimacy, which is a very sophisticated approach to legitimacy. And in his work on civilizations, he, I put Samuel Huntington on the level of like Martin Jacques as a, someone who comes up with some clever, some evocative tags that people love.
Right.
That the sort of like that hedge funds will invite you in to give lectures to their traders. But I don't think of him as a really deep thinker. I don't think that the world has divided into these civilizational zones. I don't think there are civilizational conflicts. Most of the wars in the world, other than the the never-ending Arab-Israeli war, which is probably best seen as a continuing settler colonial war. I'm not anti-Zionist, I'm not anti-Israel, and I believe in Israel's right to exist now, that it's there. I think we just have to accept these realities. But, did Israel have a right to seize Palestine? I don't think Jews had a right to seize Palestine because it's their holy land. And, Jews should never have, the Holocaust should never have happened. Jews should have been allowed to live in peace in Europe, right? So, this idea of clash of civilizations, the only place you see it is in Palestine, and there it has specific historical causes. And other than that, there aren't civilizational clashes between civilizational blocks. Even if you want to see the Chinese-Indian conflict in civilizational terms, that's to forget that actually China's most serious conflicts are with Japan, Taiwan, Korea, and Vietnam. Those are the real problems China faces. India is a second-order security issue for China. Same for India. China looms large as a threat, but let's face it, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, these are the challenges that India has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I just don't think the civilizational conflicts are meaningful.
How optimistic are you when it comes to Muslim communities globally assimilating into countries that are non-Islamic? This is an issue that is being faced in a lot of places, not just India.
Yeah, it's a real problem everywhere except the United States, as I keep saying. It's maybe Canada does reasonably well. Australia, as we've just seen with the Bondi Beach massacre, is not a country that has been successful. Muslim Australians have been ghettoized into particular, very concentrated communities where they don't mix with non-Muslim Australians. I constantly see Hindu Chinese couples among young people, being in the university world. I don't see Chinese Muslim couples. I don't see Hindu Muslim couples or Christian. I see lots of integration going on for Hindu Australians, Chinese Australians. I don't see that integration for Muslim Australians. And Australia is a relatively easy prospect compared to Sweden or Denmark, which have non-integrated Muslim minorities. That these are some of the most progressive liberal countries in the world, most welcoming countries in the world. And there's been a major backlash, not just by right-wing parties, but by social democratic parties against the non-integration of Muslim minorities. It's a serious challenge. And I'm not an expert on Islam. I don't have an answer to it. I can observe it's an obvious problem. Now, it's maybe not always a religious issue. It may be more a cultural issue, because the one exception to this rule is Iranians. Iranian communities abroad they seem to integrate very well. They're peaceful. Not Iran itself, the country, but
Yeah.
the Persians abroad don't seem to have any problems. The Persian-Australian community is a large, successful, well-integrated community that is entirely peaceful and not anti-Semitic, and so I mean, it's so it may not be all Muslim traditions, but in a very broad sense, it's a problem. Not just Arab, but Arab Muslims and Arab Muslims, Pakistani Muslims, Bangladeshi Muslims, again, maybe Indonesian Muslims. I don't know as much about them. The diaspora communities aren't that large, but the South Asian and Arab Muslim communities have not integrated well.
Of course, we know why. they look down upon the later converts. Now, sir, do you identify as a global citizen or an American or Australian?
No, I'm American. I'm absolutely. I may live abroad, but I always feel I live abroad in the same way that if you were a Roman senator sent out to Syria in the first century, you might live among the Syria. Pontius Pilate may have lived in Palestine, but he's a Roman, right? And no, I'm very much an American.
Are you a patriot? Do you love
absolutely.
America in that sense?
Absolutely. If Australia goes to war with
because-
America, I'm going underground and sabotaging Australia. Don't take that. Don't clip that, because America's never going to war with Australia. But my loyalties are with America.
Because there are questions about America as well later on.
Yeah, happy to take them.
Why is there a necessity to integrate Muslims when they aren't ready to participate? I tried to invite many Muslims to our Shakha in RSS to try and integrate them, them into the system, but they refuse to.
Look, all you can do is do your best. And if people refuse, then you can ask again and you can ask again. I'm not, as we said yesterday, I'm not blaming Hindu Indians for the lack of Muslim social integration in India. I'm just saying that you have to try because it's your country. It's not, and this may, this would be this is something that's terribly politically incorrect to say in the Indian context, but it's not their country. It should be their country. India should be a country that belongs to all Indians. But the fact is that Muslim Indians do not have the political power to take control anywhere except for Kashmir. And it's so noblesse oblige, right? I mean, if white Americans never made the effort to rehabilitate Native Americans and African Americans, they would never get rehabilitated. It's our country, so to speak. So congratulations to you. That's great that you're doing that. I'd love to hear more about it if you want to email me. If I'm ever in whatever city you're in India, I'll come to your Shaka myself. But there's nothing you can do beyond inviting and asking.
So what do you think of the American reservations in the first place? Do you think it helped or is a thorn in the path of them integrating fully, because their life in the reservations is not that great, and the only tribes who did not get any reservations were the ones who integrated and became very successful, not the Native Americans who got the reservations?
Look, reservations exist because there were treaties signed. Now, many treaties were violated, but nonetheless, treaties were signed, and Native Americans have what's called domestic dependent sovereignty, meaning that, you go to a Native American reservation, you're going to run into a Navajo police officer with a great big Navajo revolver, right? Yeah. And, and they've got Navajo social workers, and there's a Navajo community college, and they teach Navajo language. It's their reservation to do what they want with. And, that may not be good for social outcomes, But that's, I tell Australians, that's what sovereignty means. If you really are serious about indigenous sovereignty, well, there's indigenous sovereignty in America,
Right.
and to some extent in Canada as well. I don't
Right.
think that promotes good social outcomes, but
Right.
it's a historical remnant.
Fair enough. This is a good question. In how many years India's gonna have proper roads, sanitation, and healthy air?
Yeah, about 10 to 15 more years. So China, so if you looked at China, so India today has a GDP per capita equivalent to China 2010. It's 15 years behind. It may sound like a world away. China's 4 times as rich, but India's 15 years behind. China's pollution reached epic proportions in 2010. And then there was political backlash, even in a totalitarian dictatorship. There was political backlash. And for that matter, Xi Jinping didn't want to wake up every day and breathe the air in Beijing. And so he cleans it up. India is going to go through that process. I think it will be more successful in that process precisely because it is a democracy and people will demand it. But give it 15 years.
Great. That's the most positive answer I've heard on this. Let me ask a more fundamental question about democracy. If you vote for a party, should you expect them to do your bidding or that of your opposition because they are weaker?
Yeah, I know where this question is going. At least I think I do. Look, you want a party to do what you voted them in to do, obviously. And I think that, look, endless mileage has been gotten by the BJP over one sentence said by Manmohan Singh 20 years ago, right? That Muslims ... if you elide the intervening text, will have first call on our resources. And like some political faux pas, just keep on giving, and there you go. But look, the reality is that all Indian governments have governed for all Indians. And yes, you can point to this problem or that problem, and there have been problems, but broadly speaking, there's been enormous progress. And broadly speaking, even Yogi Adityanath governs for all. Uttar Pradeshi, what's the person from Uttar Pradesh called? It's not government for us and government for them. Occasionally, it may feel that way. It has happened. I know you can point to instances of injustices where it does happen, but broadly speaking, in democracies, people govern in the interest of all the people.
And occasionally this argument comes up every now and then, and it gets annoying to a point because CPIM's Chief Minister Buddhadev Bhattacharya, the greatest Chief Minister West Bengal has had in 50 years. So when he put up that Tata factory in Shingur, he was asked to take into account the opinions of the opposition, and he at one point said, wait, why? We have 235 seats and they have 35 seats. And everyone called him the most arrogant person in the history of mankind, and therefore kind of voted him out, and therefore set things into motion for the worst. So why should he have taken into account the opinions of the 35 seats?
So I don't know much about state level politics. The complaint that the BJP does not consult with the opposition is a bit ridiculous. The only time in parliamentary democracies where the opposition is consulted is typically on long-term national security issues. So, for example, when Australia was committing to buying American nuclear submarines in the AUKUS deal, the Liberal Party could have just put it through without consultation, but then they knew if this is going to be a 30-year deal, they didn't want the Labour Party to come in and reverse it, so they brought in the opposition. And in the same way that, I think that, well, I don't know if he would. I think that if Narendra Modi were going to make a major change to India's nuclear deterrent, he really should, consult with Rahul Gandhi. Right. Now, would he or not? I don't know if he would or not. But at that level, I would criticize him for not consulting. As far as pushing through bills without consultation, the Australian government does it. The British government does it. In parliamentary democracies, as long as you have a clear majority, generally they just push through what they want.
What else is the clear majority for then? Not for wasting time.
Well,
definitely.
I don't think that, look, in the American system, we have famously checks and balances. And, it's very difficult to push anything through the American system. You almost always have to get some support from the other side. You have to, go across the, but in the Westminster system, that's just not necessary. In the Westminster system, a majority is a majority. And that's that. I'm not going anywhere. Keep going.
Okay. So you can hear me, right? Parochial, Shrudeep means, when he says parochial, he means people not interested in government policies. Let's see if I can find Shrudeep's previous question. Yeah.
What was the actual question? Premium
is parochial
premium water tonight.
Oh, I thought it's a champagne.
No,
is parochial culture.
Normally, I just drink plain water, but if we're going to talk for hours, I'll desperately have to pee if I drink plain water. Sparkling water, I'll drink more slowly.
And it's you are standing. It's a standing desk.
Yeah, I'm standing tonight. Yeah. Last time I was sitting.
Is parochial culture good for the best available trade-off called democracy?
Maybe it is. Look, we all talk about wanting an informed citizenry and people actively involved in politics, but the simple fact is in every actual democracy that exists, most people are incredibly ill-informed and know very little about things. I've actually advocated that instead of complaining about that, we should just accept it, that most people are not going to know much about politics. And that's why I believe in the politics of clear choices. I think democracy operates best when clear alternatives are put in front of people. Take, for example, Donald Trump. Everybody knows, even Indians know whether or not they like Donald Trump. Every American knows, do I want Donald Trump or do I not want Donald Trump? There's no ambiguity. Even among people who have very little information, they can make a decision about that. On the other hand, when you have elections for, local county commissioners, do you want NEERAJAN for dog collector or do you want Salvatore for dog collector? No one's ever heard of either of these people. I have no idea what they're going to do. I actually think that the important thing is to accept that voters are not going to be well educated, are not going to have a lot of knowledge of what's going on, and give them clear choices. So in the Indian context, do I want this local BJP Lok Sabha candidate, or I want this local Congress Lok Sabha candidate, or this local regional party Lok Sabha, a Trinamool Lok Sabha candidate? I don't know. Do I want Narendra Modi or not? Yeah, I understand that.
Right.
And that's why I think this nationalization of Indian politics and the branding of Indian politics is not bad for democracy. It's actually good for democracy because people can know, do I want another 5 years of Modi or do I want the guy out of office? Whereas they can't really know, do I want this local candidate? So I actually view it as a positive maturing of Indian democracy, that it is moving in the direction of brand name leaders, as opposed to lamenting it as the sad passing of a more sophisticated time.
Does West Bengal rank lower as a democracy? What do you think of West Bengal's democracy rating?
I just don't have enough knowledge. I know of the Trinamool Congress, but I don't know how, and I know that West Bengal elections by Indian standards are particularly violent. So obviously that's not a good thing. My guess is that West Bengal is not as high quality a democracy as most other Indian states, but I don't have enough state level knowledge to really give an informed opinion on that.
Don't you think democracy fundamentally incentivizes division in society, especially in a highly diversified society as India?
Well, that all depends on, again, the structure of civil society. So I keep coming back to this idea of horizontal linkages. If we have people in vertical silos, and here I contrast in the book Christianity versus Hindu faith. Christianity, if you're a Presbyterian, you can't be a Catholic. If you're a Catholic, you can't be an Episcopal. If you're Episcopal, you can't be a Baptist. And that's even reflected in the fact that they all worship Sunday morning. You can't go from one to the other. We even have the term communion. If you're in communion with the Catholic Church, you cannot take communion in the Baptist Church.
Yeah.
Now, communion is literally when you take the wafer of the body of Christ, at the service, but it also means, are you part of that community, to be in communion with one church or the other? So it creates vertical silos. If you have a society based on those kind of vertical silos, where all the Catholics vote for Kennedy, all the Baptists vote for Bush, all the, if you have that situation, you can't run a democracy well, because the stakes are so high, right? And everything is an elite compromise among these parties. And you see this in places like in Bosnia. There's a multi-ethnic government set up where, there's the Serbian president, the Muslim president, and the Croatian president in Bosnia, and they each take turns being president, right? Because each community has separate political parties. Now, a well-functioning democracy has unifying parties that cut across all these lines, and instead campaign on, we're going to give free bus fares for women. The other one says, no, we're going to cut your taxes. And the other one says, no, we're going to, build an aircraft carrier. They have policies that they're debating rather than what community are you in. So democracy doesn't incentivize division. Democracy will reflect the divisions in society. Now, if those divisions exist in society, if India is a caste-based society where every caste has a party, then yes, democracy will be, dysfunctional. On the other hand, if castes are disappearing, and there's still some old caste-based parties, but they're cross. I mean, even in Bihar, the poorest state in India, the Yadavs that try to attract Muslim votes. So it's not, it's
the MY combination.
I mean, there's always some effort to get outside of your caste bubble. No matter if the party is a caste-centric party, it's still trying to attract other people to vote for it. And that's very different from, say, in Belgium. So Belgian democracy has become dysfunctional because there is as I understand it, there are essentially 4 political parties. There's a Flemish party that wants the Flemish area of Belgium out of Belgium. There's a Flemish party that wants it in Belgium. There's a French Walloon party that wants it out of Belgium. There's a Walloon party that wants it in Belgium, right? So there's no normal politics. Instead, everything is divided along these these vertical broken community lines. Then democracy becomes dysfunctional. Democracy reflects society, and Indian society is. I don't want us to overplay the religious divisions. Indian society is reasonably well integrated. At least 90% of Indian society, or 85% of Indian society, is well integrated. And then there are a few non-integrated Christians and a lot of non-integrated Muslims.
Sir, I don't remember if you said this in the book or in some podcast, that you predict that parties like Samajwadi Party will practically cease to exist very soon.
I wouldn't say very soon. As time passes. Not the Samajwadi Party, that's the Socialist Party, right?
Yeah, Akhilesh Yadav, Western educated and stuff. You mentioned
so look, the Samajwadi Party has a broader. When I said the Yadav Party, as I understand it, there's a Yadav Party in Bihar that's a specifically Yadav Party, not the Samajwadi Party. Is that correct?
Yeah, Samajwadi is from UP. Akhilesh Yadav's party.
Yeah, that's different. Okay, yeah. So the Samajwadi Party is that party may continue. It's a, look.
You said that as Indian politics and Indian democracy modernizes, they will become irrelevant.
Well, it's specifically caste-based parties, right? So the Samajwadi Party is broader than just it is a family party to a large extent, and these family parties, yes, will ultimately disintegrate or coalesce, right? And that's why I talked about the idea of the mafia coalition of parties. That they could ultimately coalesce into a national federation. But look, as India modernizes, they're just going to lose elections. They're not going to disappear because they're bad in some way. They're going to disappear because, if you look at Maharashtra, Bal Thackeray was a hugely charismatic man who created the Shiv Sena. Okay, but his children and grandchildren, much less so, right? And ultimately the party starts to disintegrate, and different people are fighting over the remnants of what was the Shiv Sena. And this sort of thing happens because these parties don't have modern bureaucratic bases. The only party that survived like really long time being a family party is the Congress, and the Congress is still riding on the momentum of the independence movement. It's not inspiring anybody.
Funny, an RSS guy asking a foreigner about RSS. Why is the RSS very anti-manufacturing and pro-services? Especially, why did a person like Sri Dattopant Thengariji take deep services-led third way stance in his book, which was ridiculous?
So I've never heard of Dattopant Thengariji. Forgive my bad pronunciation. So I don't know much about this. The RSS has become pro-services, I think, in large part because services companies have supported the RSS. I suspect this is just politics. I don't think the RSS is ideologically anti-manufacturing. It's just a matter of who's politically aligned with the RSS.
Okay. So Sudeep is further clarifying that his point is that people not interested allows elected leaders to actually implement good policies without fearing electoral backlash, like banning or buying votes of freebies, etc.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, but I don't see that as a foundation of democracy. It's just it's just a fact that we deal with, that people have very little knowledge of what their politicians are actually doing, unless there's a pressing problem. And when there's a pressing problem, then people get involved. So if there's mass unemployment or terrible pollution, then people ultimately get angry and they want something done about it. But then they forget about politics again.
How do democracies tackle the problem of corruption, incompetency? Is it a matter of time and society having to evolve to democracy?
I don't think they do much for either of these. Societies get less corrupt and more competent as they become more developed. It's just an efficiency thing. I don't think this has to do with democracy or non-democracy. It's just living in a low productivity society. Low productivity societies are highly corrupt and full of incompetent people. And to me, that's very visible. Every time I visit India, I see the number of people it takes to do any simple task. Even among university educated people who I deal with them in a whether it's a publishing context or an intellectual context, there's just in general extremely low productivity and extremely low competence, and for any given level of education. Now, there are exceptional people, of course there are, and they're truly exceptional individual Indians who then go on to run Microsoft and Google. But broadly speaking, India is a low productivity society, and low productivity societies have high levels of corruption.
Now, this is in the context of you predicting that eventually democracy will take over the world. He's saying, what if there are new forms of government succeeding democracies worldwide?
Yeah, I don't think so. So this, I wrote a book on this. It's down here somewhere. Tiny little book, American Tianxia, which is about the spread of the American world. And this is a response to Francis Fukuyama. Francis Fukuyama was far more brilliant than he realized. He wrote the famous essay on the end of history, and then he spent the rest of his career saying that he didn't really mean the end of history. And he caught the zeitgeist with something that he himself did not fully understand. Forgive me, I know you must be listening out there, Francis, but I think he didn't fully understand it. Individualism is corrupting of all other societies. And individualism, he said that the end of history was democracy in politics and the market in economics. No, the end of history is individualism. And if you go back to his argument, it's all based on the work of a Hegelian scholar, neo-Hegelian scholar named Alexander Kojev. And Hegel and Kojev's interpretation of Hegel, essentially it says that, well, there's, all of you have heard of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, right? And what history is one group wanting something, another group opposing it. There's a clash until ultimately there's a new synthesis, and then there's a new antithesis to that old synthesis. And in Marxian theory, this becomes a class conflict, right? So the proletariat is opposing the bourgeoisie, and ultimately, there's a conflict between the two that results in a classless synthesis. And the end of history in Marxism is a classless society. Now, what happened was, when the proletariat overthrew the bourgeoisie in the Soviet Union, all it did was created a new nomenclatura class over them, and class conflict began again in the Soviet Union. Same thing happened in China. What eliminates history is the coming of individualism, that you're not part of a group, you're just you. And you're striving for your own individual advancement, not for the good of your class. I couldn't care less about whether the proletariat advances. I want to advance. I couldn't care less whether Hindu faith advances. I want to advance. Couldn't care less about whether India advances. I want to advance. Individualism undermines all forms of group identity. And so Hegelian, if you're a Hegelian, history as such only exists because organized groups are fighting other organized groups. Once you're an individualist, there's no more history. And Europe has become post-historical in a way, because what was happening? Well, Germany and France were fighting over the coal mines of Belgium. Each of them wants these coal mines. Well, once you give up on, it's not a German coal mine or a French coal mine, it's my coal mine. I'm going to own it, or my company's going to own it. And a French investor can invest in my company, and a German investor can invest in my company. It doesn't matter. Capitalism in the economic sphere, and the corollary in the political sphere is democracy. That it's like, well, I individually can decide what I want in my politics. I can choose this party, or I can use that. I don't have to vote as a member of my caste. I don't have to vote as a member of my religion. I don't have to vote as a member of my language group. I can just vote as me. And I can weigh my own priorities. Once you have individualism, democracy becomes inevitable, capitalism becomes inevitable, history ends. And that is a virus that infects, because, and this is something, and I put in my, not in this book, I put in another book, The New Authoritarianism, a quote from Marquis de Lafayette, the French aristocrat who joined the American Revolution, saying that now that there's one place in the world that's free, the world will always have freedom. Because if you don't want to be caught in history, if you don't want to be a Muslim fighting Hindu oppression in West Bengal, move to America. Then none of that's your problem. You're just trying to build your car dealership into a big franchise and make money. And so, like, once there's a place where you can be free, the rest of the world disintegrates. And that's what happened to the Soviet Union. I mean, the US has to build walls to keep people out. The Soviet Union had to build walls to keep people in.
Yeah.
Right. Because people want to, I mean, if the US were simply to open its borders, the US could have a population of 2 billion in 20 years, right? Because everyone wants to get in. Now, not literally everybody, but so many people want to get in that it undermines other societies. And that's what this book is about, how to undermine China. That Tianxia is the Chinese name for a
I picked this book up as well.
All under heaven. Anyone, it's super expensive. I can't get the publishers to discuss. I'll send anyone a PDF. But I can't do that legally. But I'd like to buy back the rights and just put the PDF online. And I'll talk to the publisher about that when I get some time. And so this is why democracy spreads, because no country and I say this categorically, no country that's been a democracy for 20 years has ever gone back. Right? Once people get used to the idea that, hey, I can vote for what I want. You can't stop it. And so the column of who's in the democracy column and who's in the non-democracy column it's always moving towards the democracy column. And the only reason it's not is because people classify, I mean, if you pick up one of those books about the end of democracy, How Democracies Die, the most ridiculous book ever written, their key case for how democracies die is Venezuela. And it's like, you're teaching me and learning global lessons about how democracy dies by writing about how Venezuelan democracy died? When was Venezuela a democracy? Oh, for 5 years in the 1990s, Venezuela was a democracy and then it died. It's like, show me a real democracy that's ever died. It hasn't happened. And that's why democracy is the future. Sorry for the lecture, but I guess that's what you're here for.
No. Yeah, exactly. Sir, I'm obviously a huge fan of the US Constitution anyway, but have you read the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers?
Not every single one, but I'm very familiar with them, yes.
Okay. Oh my God, the Anti-Federalist papers. It's I think one of the peaks of
they're much better than the
humankind.
Federalist Papers.
Yeah.
It's been a conspiracy.
Now,
it's literally been a conspiracy
go on.
of American historiography to repress the Anti-Federalist Papers in favor of the Federalist paper.
Do you have a dog in the fight? Do you pick a side in those two debates?
Yeah, I told you I'm a huge fan of the Anti-Federalist papers. I think it was the Anti-Federalists.
That's just academically.
No, personally, as an American,
Okay, nice.
I believe in freedom. I don't believe in managed democracy. I believe that. Well, to quote the American journalist H.L. Mencken, and what's funny is the Indian scientist Gautam Desiraju also quoted Mencken. And I found that I said, Gautam, did you steal that from my book? Because how did you know this quote, which was democracy is the theory that people know what they want and deserve to get it good and hard. You want this stupid thing, and by God, you're gonna get it whether you like it or not. And look, people want stupid things, but I believe they should get them. So, Anti-Federalist, absolutely.
Veer Savarkar also quoted.
New Yorkers voted for Mamdani to open, state grocery stores. Well, let's have the state grocery stores. You'll see how it goes, and then you'll vote a different way next time, right?
Yeah. Again, this is the Swami Vivekananda aspect of yours. You are saying that yes, let them lose their freedoms a little, and then they'll learn the lesson. Yeah. But you are not saying that prevent them from bringing in anti-freedom governments.
Look, within reason, right?
Fair enough.
I think that people will always choose freedom in the end. I'm opposed to anti-freedom legislation. Like, I think the new Australian social media bans are idiotic. I don't think they'll last very long.
Oh, okay.
I think people will realize they're idiotic. And, look, people give the theories like, what if people voted to end voting? And political theorists love to challenge students with these things. My response to that is, has any democracy ever had a vote to end voting? If not, then stop bothering me with it. I mean, it's just, this isn't a practical question that people get asked.
Okay. By the way, Veer Savarkar also quoted from Anti-Federalist papers in his 6 Glorious Epochs. Okay. By the way, I had a personal question as well. What do you think of Hegel?
I find him too difficult to read. He's just impossible. I mean, I think it is to the limited extent I understand Hegel's theory of history. It is provocative and interesting, but I have to admit I've only read it in secondary sources. I've tried reading Hegel. I find it just too impossibly abstruse, at least in English. I don't read German. The only thing I know he got right was that he said in the 19th century that the two great forces of the future would obviously be America and Russia. And I think he got that right 100 years before the Cold War.
Yeah. Sir, a lot of today's classical liberals or / conservatives like Douglas Murray, Sir Roger Scruton, James Lindsay have the tendency to brush aside these kinds of writings, calling them gobbledygook. But I was thinking that what if it's just because we as lay people, outsiders, are not getting it? But now you are saying that even you don't get it. I was thinking that even a layperson would not get any STEM paper.
No, look, I
So
think there's an
this is gobbledygook.
obligation. I think there's an obligation on authors to make their ideas clear. And I'm not going to put in the work, I'll be honest. It's to figure out what someone has to say. Just tell me what you want to say, right? I mean, why make me figure out what you're trying to say? In very technical fields, that's inevitable because, you have to know the language of the science or the mathematics to be able to talk about it. But if you contrast, I mean, if you contrast to contemporary, when did Hegel write? Second half of the 19th century? No, first half of the 19th century. So if you think of my favorite philosopher, William James, I'll contrast William James and John Dewey, his student, or not student, his near contemporary. I guess he was a student. William James is brilliant, straightforward, easy to understand, no problem. He says what he means. You can read him, no problem. John Dewey, it's like, oh, do I have to read, hundreds of pages of this abstruse stuff to get to the point? And I don't think it's because the material is so technical. I think it's just because some writers revel in the sophistry and some writers say what they mean to say. And actually, I have a colleague and friend who said that one reason my books don't get discussed is that I'm very clear about what I mean. Unequivocal. I say what I want to say. And there's some maybe there's some truth to that you can't debate, what was the Babones' true meaning here, because it's
right.
Yeah. So no, I'm not a big fan of Hegel, but
this book definitely, I guess your intention was to write a pop sociology book, but definitely comes across as a pop sociology book. So unless a book has that air of not being very accessible, people don't respect it in the academia.
Well, I will insist that the book, and anyone who reads it, I know you've read it, will experience this. The tone and accessibility may be pop sociology. The material is highly technical and well documented, and very, and there's no compromises there. The only compromises are, for Western audiences, I avoided getting into some complexities. So, for example, I left caste out of it because I think caste is a disappearing fault line of Indian politics. So I didn't go down the caste route. I instead focused on Islam. But the things I focus on, there's a much more detailed technical discussion in this book than you'll find in virtually any Western political science book about India. To give you an example of that, of what I mean, you can find a dozen books on Indian democracy that will go through the litany of, here's what the VDEM index says. Here's what the Freedom House index says. Here's what the International Religious Freedom Index says. This is the only book that goes through each of those and unpacks and analyzes each of the indices. So it's a much more technical book than the other academic books. It's just written in accessible language.
What do you think of libertarianism, by the way?
Huh?
What do you think of libertarianism?
So here you're supposed to be going to the readers' questions. I know, or the listeners' questions. I know that's
this one is a reader's question.
Okay, libertarianism is like most political philosophies. It's a childish, idealistic philosophy. At its core is a positive message for society. But, we live in a practical world, and at least libertarianism, as expressed by most libertarians, just doesn't have any chance of actually being implemented. And so...
Now, when I say libertarianism, I do not mean anarcho-capitalism. I mean the minarchism of Milton Friedman. There is a country, there is a government, but it just protects life, liberty, property, and that's it.
Yeah, that's just... and so what? So I'm living in Australia. Am I going to live in a highly developed Western society and there are people begging in the streets because we don't have any unemployment insurance and they didn't provide for themselves? Am I willing to step over dead bodies that have frozen in the snow? Well, not snow in Australia, when I lived in Pittsburgh, I'm willing to step over dead bodies, and well, they didn't get death insurance, so no one's going to take away their body because, it's their responsibility to have provided. I mean, we're just not going to do those things. We're going to, we're going to take care of each other, even if it's expensive, even if it's let's take the simplest example of drug addicts. Libertarianism, all drugs should be available. It's up to you. Use your own personal responsibility. Well, but, drug addicts then start breaking into apartments to steal money to pay for their drugs, and we're going to throw them in prison. It's like, well, it quickly becomes very expensive housing all of these. We could just kill them. I mean, but we're usually not willing to kill them. And so then we have this huge expense of a drug-addicted population clogging up our prison system, when it would be much cheaper and more humane to restrict the availability of drugs and try to treat them. So it's just not a practical like almost all totalizing political philosophies. It's just not practical in the real world. As an inspiration,
people are saying
fine.
no wonder
Sorry?
People are saying no wonder you like BJP.
What does that have to do with the BJP? I mean,
because BJP is that opposed to libertarianism for these exact reasons as well.
Oh, every party is. It's not a BJP thing. There are no libertarian parties that have any realistic chance of governing. I mean, again, when I talk about, I'm a comparative social scientist, and whenever we come up to these political philosophy questions, I always say, look, there are at least 50 or 60 democracies in the world. And then at the state level, there are another couple hundred that, find me one example. If nobody's doing it out of those couple hundred polities, then it probably just doesn't work.
You're right. Why is Marxist thought widely accepted in the humanities while fascist ideology is completely excluded, even though Marxist ideology has killed more than fascists?
That's one of the great mysteries. There, of course, you could go to Gramsci and the march through the institutions, but I think it's more to do with the idealism of students. I mean, I called libertarians childish. Let me call academics in general are generally intellectually childish, in that most academics have never left the cocoon of the university world. And Marxism is very common. And fascism, and by fascism, I don't mean Nazism, I mean the broader fascism. So fascism as enunciated by Benito Mussolini in his book. What was it called? It's called Fascism, Introduction to Fascism. I forget the ideology of fascism. And then it's close enough to Nazism and to Phalangism in Spain. But, these fascist ideologies are middle-aged man ideologies. Communism, by contrast, are youthful ideologies. And that's why so many young communists turn into fascists, right? Because they get older. So communism is so widely accepted in the humanities and in academia more broadly because it's a idealistic philosophy of young people. Why can't we just all share equally? Why can't I have free university? Why can't somebody, in a way, I've even heard it, and I can't give proper credits. I can't remember who I heard lecturing on this. And it might just have been a random YouTuber. It may not even have been an academic saying that communism is the philosophy of the family. That, you're as a kid, as a kid, you have free food, free place to live. Someone else is always picking up the bill. You never have to, worry about anything. And so if you're constantly cocooned in this childish fantasy world in academia, you've never had to work outside academia. You've never had a real boss. You can't be fired if you're an American or European academia. It sounds very appealing. Oh yeah, the whole world should be like this. And it's like, no, and people don't realize that they're being coddled, right? You're only able to live like that at the sufferance of somebody else who's working very hard and, making your privileged life possible. So I think it's no surprise that Marxism, at least Marxism, not the Marxism of Karl Marx, but Marxism as it has come to exist by his followers, that Marxism is broadly accepted in academia. It's no surprise, because Marxism is beloved of university freshmen, and if you never leave the university, you remain a Marxist your whole life.
That mathematician slash philosopher who wrote the book on black swan events, I think he said it, that the family has to be communist, then as the circle grows, you further should be more libertarian as possible. But your criticisms of libertarianism were for the same reasons. Yeah,
Sorry, what?
Your criticism of libertarianism were on the same lines as you described the Marxist students in the campus, that why can't we just get along? Why can't the poor people just get free stuff?
No.
Why
I think
should they
libertarianism
die and then freeze?
No. I think libertarianism has a very strong philosophical basis. It's just that very few people are willing to live with the intellectual consequences. It's a very harsh philosophy, and thankfully, I think most of us are too humane to be willing to live in a libertarian society. But I think such a society would operate very well. I mean, I think it'd be a highly productive, really high quality economy. And I think for people like you or me, it might operate very well. But you have to be completely heartless. You have to, because once you start having a heart, your libertarianism is over, because you're not willing to accept the consequences of those who did not plan and take proper responsibility. You're not willing to take the consequences of market failures. It's easy to say that everyone should buy private unemployment insurance, but what about when that's not available? It's not always available. There are lots of market failures. What if I bought private unemployment insurance, but that private company, which is lightly regulated because we're libertarians, it does not actually put aside proper reserves, and it goes out of business and doesn't pay my policy. I mean, they're just the ruthless, red in tooth and nail libertarian world. It's just not. We're not willing to live in it. And once you start having a heart,
go on.
Once you start having a heart, it's no longer libertarian.
When was America great? Which do you think was the best era?
America started great and is still the greatest country in the world. There's America, and I don't mean that patriotically. I mean that scientifically. That America is the great absorbing culture. There's a book in the future about it. I was supposed to write it in 2019. It's a long story. It didn't get written on sabbatical, but there's a future book on American civilization, and I'll put this all together in a book, but sometime in the 2030s. It's not going to happen soon.
Okay. Is the American problem race-based rather than religion-based then?
Yes, race has always been, right from the beginning, the original sin in America. It's still a problem. We see race. We're always very race conscious. If someone commits a crime, we'll ask, it'll be described as a black man, a white man, an Asian man, Native American man. Gender and race are our two categories. All of social science in the U.S. is centered on gender and race. Class is a distant third. There used to be, it still is, the largest section of the American Sociological Association is the race, class, and gender section. It was just the everything section, but it's all about race and gender. It's, class is largely a distant third category. Race is everything in America, and we instantly racialize people into categories. It's statistically enshrined. It's slowly going to disappear through intermarriage, but the drop of blood rule still applies, in that if you're at all black, you are all black. And that used to be something that stigmatized people. Now it's something that people take pride in and take advantage of. But either way, we still racialize people in the United States.
Yeah. Do you think multiculturalism creates a hurdle towards integration, and can India implement this US integration model instead of the Canadian multiculturalism model?
Yeah, multiculturalism is a recipe for long-term divisions. Canada has an official multiculturalism, which doesn't operate very much in practice. Just like Australia has official multiculturalism, it hasn't really created a multicultural country. In Canada, only a few groups have stayed multicultural. Now in Canada, there's the French issue. So multiculturalism in Canada originates from the demands of French Canada to have French language education in Quebec, right? So that's where, and then once you have French Canada, then you can have Sikhs who maintain a separate culture in Canada. But in Canada and Australia, other than a small number of groups, so in Australia, multiculturalism is Aboriginal and Muslim. Everyone else is just integrating. In Canada, it's French and Sikh, right? And maybe Muslim. I don't know the status of Islam in Canada. Everyone else is integrating. The real multicultural societies have been dead ends. So, European multiculturalism has been a dead end, like in Belgium with Walloons and Flemish, or in old Sweden where there were Finns, Swedes, and Norwegians, all separated into separate countries. Soviet Union, was a multicultural experiment, and instantly, when people had the opportunity, they became, Russian, Ukrainian, Armenian. Instantly, their multicultural experiment collapsed the minute they were allowed to. Yugoslavia was a multicultural experiment. Multiculturalism, if it's taken seriously, as it was in the Soviet Union and in Yugoslavia and in Switzerland and Belgium, it is just a recipe for long-term divisions. Switzerland has survived, and it's the only example of a multicultural country surviving, but I think that's largely because they're so incredibly wealthy that, what problems do you have when you're that rich?
You talked about Flemish nationalism. That's why I remembered. Konrad Elst, right?
Not well, but I've met him and I've read some of his work.
Yeah. So, do you know he used to get called a terrorist and terrorist sympathizer because there was one Flemish nationalist who once bombed a city, and he had one Konrad Elst book in his bedroom.
No. I'm not surprised that he would be vilified, but I doubt he's a Flemish nationalist. So. And even if he is, I don't think he's a terrorist. There's nothing wrong with being a Flemish nationalist.
What do you think about the MAGA movement? Is it a threat to the inclusiveness of American society?
No, the MAGA movement's fine. I can get my MAGA hat out if you want. I bought one for the fun of it, so I do have my Trump hat. It is the MAGA movement was a reaction to the vilification of. There are white roots to MAGA. I don't think we should deny that. That is the vilification of whites in America is part of the reason why MAGA came to exist. Yeah. But it's not a white nationalist movement. That is, it's a movement. It's a movement of people who felt excluded from the new, multicultural or racialized America created by Barack Obama, who ironically campaigned. His famous, what got him elected was a speech where he said, "There is no white America and Black America. There are only Americans." And what's so ironic is that that was his speech, and then he won election, and then immediately it was, "There's Black America, there's white America," which is separate. MAGA was an outsider movement that is not exclusive, and ironically, although the MAGA movement is more white than the population as a whole, it is actually a very inclusive movement in the sense that I think MAGA people would love for more Black, and they've been thrilled that Hispanic people have joined it. I mean, the whole original narrative from 2016 that Trump was anti-Hispanic, it's like, Trump's been very popular in the Mexican American community. And, that so far from being a threat to inclusiveness, the MAGA movement, although majority white, is desperate to have blacks in it and is advancing black leaders and embraces any black MAGA person who comes in there. They're embracing them, which is the opposite of, the former, what I called in this other book. This book should have been called The New Liberal Authoritarianism. By calling it The New Authoritarianism, no one was quite sure what authoritarianism I meant. And that was a much more exclusivist movement.
What makes America great? Isn't it more close to libertarianism compared to communism, socialism?
Yes, I mean, America's more libertarian than socialist. Absolutely, it's individualism. Individualism is it's what Americanism is, and that's why places like China and Russia, and leaders like Vladimir Putin, find individualism so threatening. That's why he says that that if you're gay, you're not Russian. If you're gay, you're American. Now, it's ridiculous. Of course, if you're a gay Russian, you're Russian. But from his point of view, if you're a gay Russian, you probably want to move to Sydney or San Francisco. And you know what? He's right. You probably do want to move to Sydney or San Francisco. Versus if you are a heterosexual Orthodox Russian, you probably want to stay in Novosibirsk. Right. And that individualism, that seeking individual fulfillment, draws people into American networks, whether it's into America itself as a citizen or just onto YouTube. You, NEERAJAN, because you live stream on YouTube in English, you're an honorary American in something. Like, you're less organically Indian than than the thugs who beat you up. And that phenomenon is repeated over and over and over again, that people have that individualism draws people into America and is the foundation of American success. I mean, the reason America is so much more productive than anywhere else in the world is the individualism. People pursuing their own self-fulfillment instead of, and there's something lost by that. We don't just celebrate that. I mean, it means that we don't have truly supportive families in America. We don't have communities. I once pointed out, I was consulted by a group in the U.S. was trying to do good work to reduce poverty in their city in Virginia. They said, well, we can't wait for the federal government to reduce poverty. We want to do what we can to reduce poverty. And I told them, you can't reduce poverty in your city. They said, what do you mean? I said, well, if you reduce poverty in your city, the people who you raise out of poverty, they're going to move out. They don't want to live in a poor city like yours. They're just going to move.
Of course.
On the other hand, if you improve the quality of your community, improve the housing, improve the services, well, then the poor people are going to be forced out because other people are going to want to move there, right? So, there's no such thing as community in America. We're all just consumers. So there's something lost in that American greatness. It's not all rah-rah America. But it is the foundation of America's strength, even if it means, I don't speak Italian, I don't speak Greek, I don't go to the Catholic Church, I don't go to the Greek Orthodox Church, I see my family once a year. I mean, there is, I'm a rootless vagabond pursuing my own interests in the world. And while that's a lot of fun for me, I don't contribute to making what I call, and I don't call them derisively, I call it admiringly, local people. There are people who are doing a lot to build their communities. They're volunteering, to create, ambulance services or to feed the homeless or to like rooted people who really make community happen. I'm not supporting the local Australian culture. I'm going to the Thai restaurant tonight, the Indian restaurant tomorrow, the pizza restaurant the other 5 nights a week, because I really prefer pizza. So something is lost, but something is gained.
And go on. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'm a music producer by profession, and my background is in heavy metal, and this guitar is specifically because Metallica's vocalist uses this exact shape. What do you think of biological determinism? The kind of people who over-index on our biological nature and use it to explain everything. How valid is this view, and can humans adapt to modernity?
Yeah, I'm not a sociobiologist. Humans are incredibly adaptable. Obviously, our biological nature determines a lot of things, primarily sexuality, more than anything else. I think sociologists and social scientists want to deny sexual differences that are glaringly obvious to everybody else. But beyond sexual dimorphism, I mean, humans are incredibly sexually dimorphic. And social scientists just don't want to accept that obvious fact that everybody else recognizes. Other than that, I don't think there's any real racial biological determinism. We see, I mean, African Americans have lower accomplishment than white Americans, and people in Africa have lower accomplishment than Europeans. But take a person from Africa and put him in America, and he becomes incredibly productive overnight, right? It's embeddedness in social networks and the people's positions in those social networks that determine their productivity and their life chances. That said, a lot of how we interact as human beings is presumably biological. I'm not a specialist in it, but I suspect when you get outside of gender and sexuality, the biological determinism probably becomes much less important, is my instinct.
What's your opinion about Abrahamic religion's doctrine of worship my God or perish doctrine, which intensified with Christianity and Islam?
I understand the Hindu resentment of that. I don't think it's very characteristic of, it's not very theologically characteristic of Christianity. Christianity and Islam both have become state religions. And as such, they've interacted in strange ways. Now, I'm not as much of an expert in Islam, but it's so easy to find the exhortations to violence and repression in the Quran that I don't doubt they're there. If you go to the gospel, theologically, Christianity should be, I'm actually reading a book right now that takes the extreme view. I told you I'm a Vivekananda fan. Jesus, Christianity, and Swami Vivekananda, that takes the whole thesis that Jesus's time in the wilderness was actually spent in India. I find that very convincing. I think it's, although the thesis in the book pushes extremely far beyond what we can know, the fact is that Christianity, if you actually believe in it, is very much an Indian religion of ahimsa and self-denial and give all things to faith and live a simple life. And literally, Jesus says, if your enemy strikes you one cheek, turn the other cheek. It's better to be hit again than to hit someone back. It's a very Gandhian view of things. So is Christianity that kind of my God or no one else? Yes, organized Christianity, organized state-supported Christianity is that way. But I think any organized state-supported religion becomes, Japanese Shinto in World War II was extremely repressive, right? It wasn't so. Could a Hindu, could that happen to Hindu faith? Maybe not, but it's happened in Buddhism. Look at the persecutory
Myanmar.
Buddhism of Myanmar, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Tibet when it was independent. And Buddhism is a dharmic religion. It's not a Abrahamic religion. So, I'm not so sure about it, but it's the subtext of the question, which is, has Sanatana Dharma been much more accepting and embracing historically? Obviously, yes.
But
I'm a big
if you
fan
ask
of Vivekananda. I'd like to have time to
Yeah.
read more Vivekananda. I have picked up, my occasional bit of paraphernalia. So that's Sri Ramakrishna.
You are even more
and other-
Bengali than I am.
Yeah, but but for me, it's an intellectual exercise, not a not a religious exercise. But the more I read Vivekananda, the more I like him, and I haven't read as much Vivekananda as I would like to.
But if you ask the Ramakrishna Mission, every religion is equally peaceful and nice, because I have this book called Thus Spake Prophet Muhammad from the Ramakrishna Mission, and if you read this, you'll convert to Islam right now.
So my Bengali
makes
friend,
also.
my Bengali friend educated at the Ramakrishna Mission has been sending me photos the last couple days of the Christmas celebrations at the Ramakrishna temple. So.
I see this stress on individualism in all the great thinkers I have come across, like Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Camus, etc. But how do I stop the primal tribalism when my group is at risk?
Well, you see, if you're a real individualist, you don't even have a group. I mean, who's my group? I don't have a group. So I would say that's an incomplete.
You're an American
individualism.
patriot.
If my group is America, then my group is so enormous that it's hardly.
I see.
It's hardly meaningful. There's no tribalism for a real individualist. There's a humanism, broad humanism. Now I have to admit, I've read Nietzsche. I haven't read Schopenhauer or Camus. I'm not sure that Nietzsche is much of an individualist. But I guess he's open to many readings because. He was a kooky guy who liked to say crazy things and write in poems and such. And because if you write your philosophy as a poem,
they were tweets, basically.
Huh?
His book was basically a collection of tweets, small.
Yeah,
aphorisms.
I mean, if Zarathustra, and like if instead you said, so if Nietzsche had said, "Here is what I mean." Here it is, then I could accept it. But he's very cryptic about things. But a group at risk is I take your point, and if Americans are at risk, Americans pull together, sure. But hopefully in a more individualistic world, that happens less and less. I mean, the whole point of the end of history thesis is that over time, as more and more people exempt themselves from group participation, history as the conflict between groups ends. And that project has worked for North America and Western Europe, where there's no longer intergroup conflict. There's conflict between these regions and other regions. But within these regions, there's no intergroup conflict to speak of, and my prognosis is that will spread. That zone of good order will spread.
Why do you say that caste-based politics will be going down? Because we are seeing caste lines calcifying intensely with the politicization of the reservation system and essentially divisive.
I don't think that caste. So as long as there are reservations, there will be people claiming caste identities. Now, as we've seen in India, there's a fight over everyone wanting a reservation. And so, every group trying to get itself classified as a OBC or a backwards class. And, ultimately that just makes everything very silly. What I don't think is that it's going to be the basis for political parties. So, if the BJP, which is not a caste-based party, wants to get the votes of people of a certain caste in a certain state, they offer that caste a reservation, right? But you don't need a caste-based party to get your reservation. You just need, hey, won't someone make a reservation for me? If you will, I'll vote for your party. And that's what I'm talking about the disappearance of caste-based politics. It's not that I think caste will disappear. And there's a great book I read recently. It's somewhere here in the bookshelf somewhere, Caste as Social Capital, making the argument that, casteism is a bad thing, but caste identity is not necessarily a bad thing. And I think that's a quite reasonable argument.
Yeah, a lot of Hindutwadis believe this. I don't, but ask Professor, what do you think of the Argentinian president, the libertarian president?
Yeah, I'll get my chainsaw out and see what I have a MAGA hat, but I don't have a chainsaw. I haven't really thought that much about him. I mean, he makes a big splash, and is he a necessary corrective in Argentina? Probably yes, but I don't know I don't know enough about him to know, how successful he's being. I don't know.
But the gospel isn't complete on its own. Without the Old Testament, Christianity doesn't stay coherent.
Yeah, I disagree. It depends. I mean, if you go to any church, every week they do the Old Testament reading, the New Testament reading. I don't even think that Christianity. I don't think Christianity says much. So if you take the gospel and you read it naively, that is, you don't try to read it as a sophist trying to connect it to the Old Testament. If you just read it for what Jesus says, it does not fulfill the Old Testament. It does not. I mean, it's simply it's virtually completely disconnected from the Old Testament. Now, the epistles do try to make the connection and say, no, Jesus really was, talk about. I think Jesus's ministry was fundamentally about saying that these old practices are not really what life is about. What life is about is being good to each other. And or to use one of my favorites, as Bill and Ted would say, be excellent to each other. And I don't know if you guys are old enough to have watched Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but I strongly recommend it. And it's a fantastic movie. Kuno Reeves and the other guy. No one ever remembers the other guy. But it's a movie that made Kuno Reeves famous. And highly recommended movie. If you don't want to watch the whole movie, just get the clip about Socrates, as they pronounce Socrates, and just Google Bill and Ted Socrates and watch the Socrates where the Socrates gets really excited because they're trying to explain their philosophy, and their philosophies they're trying to say, we're all just dust in the wind, and it said, and then they say, you, me, and Socrates says, yes, you get my philosophy. And so anyway, it's a great movie.
So unfortunately, Professor, I think you probably have some time, but I don't. I will have to prepare for my next podcast at 7:30. I still haven't had my breakfast.
So anyone who has more questions, email me. I'm happy to answer questions. Great to talk to everybody.
No, I will take one or two more questions.
All right.
Maybe when you are free sometime in the next month, or maybe 2 months later.
We've given 6 hours to this. I can't talk forever.
Yeah, 6 hours, pretty much.
It's not the time though. It's the number of days. I have other things to do in life. So let's get through as many questions as you can do. I'll try to give shorter answers. Let's do the speed round. Let's go.
Why are you so optimistic about India while even Indians are not this much blackpilling?
Because empirically, India is advancing very rapidly. It is a solid democracy. It's growing 7% a year. It's a great place.
Thoughts on the stupidity of the political and social discourses that's happening in India? For example, Aravalli Hills protest, Farm Bills protest, and the government kneeling to them.
These are small back channels in the tide of history. Things are always going to go wrong. Things are always going to move backwards. But things in general are moving forwards. These are ripples. These are ripples on the broad stream of history.
Which one is a better form of democracy? Westminster system of joint legislative and executive, or US presidential system where president is somewhat independent of legislative?
Look, I've grown up with the US system and the quote unquote checks and balances embedded in it. I'm a fan of it, but I admit that there's no particular advantage it has over Westminster democracy. They both seem to work.
How can Hindus and Christians form an alliance like Jews and Christians where they can counter the greater evil theology?
I think the big alliance that Hindus need are Hindus with Jews. And I think Hindus and Jews face a lot of the same pressures. I've written about anti-Hinduism being a parallel of anti-Semitism. I think that's really...
Yeah, that is the next question.
That's what people should be talking about. If you Google Salvatore Babones, Hinduism, anti-Semitism, anti-Hinduism, anti-Semitism, you'll find my article for first post that I published on that.
Were the old religions more tolerant to other religions in the old Europe, Africa, or in Asia?
No.
He means probably pre-Abrahamic.
Oh, the pre-Abrahamic, who knows? I mean, we don't have a lot of actual history. I mean, ancient Rome, depends on which era. There was a cult of the emperor during the imperial period. Before that, yes and no. There was all the complexity of life. But if you go back far enough, ancient Greek and Roman religion is just Hindu. I mean, it's the same people, the same gods, the same practices, just different names.
Yeah. You mentioned before you think India is roughly 15 years behind China. That is hard to believe given they are 5 times our per capita and have shining cities.
Look up China's GDP per capita in 2010. Look up India's GDP per capita today. Adjust for inflation. Take 10 or 20% off China's for overstatement, and they're equal.
What? Oh, this one too.
I mean, statistically. I mean, it's just
right.
Just statistically, yeah.
Left of center in America supports free speech, but the left in India absolutely opposes it with idealistic language. Why? While claiming it's a global ideology. Why?
Supporting free speech is now considered an ultra right-wing position in the US, Australia, and UK.
Yes.
So it's these things, it just changes over time, whether people feel that free speech is a threat to them or a boon to them. It just seems to determine whether or not they support freedom of speech.
Will you ever have a meet and greet in India, especially Kolkata? Well, if someone...
I'd love to. Every time I go to India, I try to arrange a meet and greet. Schedules just are very, very tight. I will be doing the book launch at the Bhopal Literature Festival. I know it's a long way to go for people, but I'll have 2 full days just to meet people and chat in Bhopal. I previously had a couple days in Delhi like that. I'd previously had a couple days in Mumbai like that. This trip, I'm going to Bhopal, Mumbai, and Delhi, but Mumbai and Delhi will be fully booked. Just one back-to-back thing. Lit Fest is when I have time to meet people. Someday I'll get to
you
Kolkata.
Are that popular in India. You are that popular in India, but so I thought your channel would take off, but for some reason that didn't. But you are popular in the events and stuff.
I don't have a channel. I do random videos once every few months.
If caste is I thought...
I mean, I don't have a YouTube... I mean, I have a YouTube
more.
channel, but I don't make content for the YouTube channel. I just... When something upsets me or annoys me, I put up a video. But I'm not producing weekly content.
If caste is...
like that.
Yeah, of course. If caste is inevitable, what can one realistically do? Is there no real way to deal with it?
And it's not inevitable. It's just a loyalty people have, and more power to them if they feel they gain something from that. But I just don't see it as a big issue. Though I'll be writing about that. Like I said, I'm working on this book on sociology of Sanatana and Dharma, and that will be a 2030 project.
2030.
Yeah, it's going to take me 5 years to do the research.
Yeah, it will. After India solves its pollution problem 15 years. Go on.
I almost moved to India in 2022 to take a job at a university, but the pay just wasn't quite there. The problem is the pay is too low in India. I know expenses are low, but I have to plan for retirement, and I can't save for retirement on an Indian salary. Also, the wife is very... the pollution deters the wife more than it deters me.
After India solves this pollution problem 15 years down the line, would you then consider to be an HOD of humanities at a university? You said it some years back. This we just took up. Is the FPTP or the European style voting system better, or what system is better?
I think first past the post is much better because it allows you to fire your leaders. Proportional representation has the problem that you can't hold people accountable. And I actually think that much more important, so political theory always focuses on the theory of representation. I don't think representation is the heart of democracy. I think the heart of democracy is accountability. And if you can fire your leaders, then they're accountable.
As a person who is trying to become a sociologist, any advice?
Don't do it. Sociology is a declining profession. It's still expanding in India, but it won't expand much longer in India. The jobs just aren't there. Write your sociology as a... Remember, being a sociologist means that's what you teach. You can always write what you want. Look at Desi Raju. He teaches chemistry, and he's now writing books on politics. Look at Ranganathan. I mean, he's a biologist. He writes these books on politics. Do something that will actually support you. Become a data scientist is the top thing you could do. And you can always then be social science adjacent and write on social science.
Nietzsche actually hated all mass movements, whether nationalism, socialism, etc., because he essentially saw them as a herd, which is slave morality, according to him, obstructs the overman. Okay, this is probably literally the last question here. Have you seen Dhurandhar yet? Because he's asking about Dhurandhar. Two characters from Dhurandhar. Are you in favor of Rahman Dakat or Chaudhry Aslam?
I'm hoping to see it this weekend. Haven't seen it yet.
Okay. Bangalore has low AQI, a lot of good universities here, and a lot of Bengalis as well. Even Pune, I think.
Yeah, make me an offer.
But probably not comparably as low AQI as Australia. That would be the problem.
Yeah, Australia is beautiful. I mean, I'm looking at the harbor right now. We have lorikeets visiting our balcony every day. We have beautiful air. We have fantastic food. Great pay. I mean, it's difficult to beat. And my wife wants to be here. I mean, just being honest. I'd probably have to get divorced to move to India. The serious exploration of India was because my university was reorganizing, and I was worried about losing my job. And that was why I was exploring options.
So why does she like Australia so much? Is she Australian or American?
No, she's Latvian, but it's such a beautiful place to live. I mean, it's just beautiful here. There's Sydney, not Australia. Sydney is an absolutely beautiful place to live. Look, I think EVMs have to have audit trails. I think it's ridiculous that in the US there are EVMs without audit trails. My understanding is that Indian EVMs have audit trails, paper audit. I don't know the exact details. But the US is mostly EVMs now. How to prevent
another partition?
Yeah, I don't think India has to worry about that.
I see. Okay, that's the end of the questions. We literally ultimately took all the questions. Rest assured.
Great. All right.
Thanks a lot, Professor. But I know even though you have better things to do, I still hope you make some time for the non-better things as well. Maybe once a month.
Not
hopefully.
Once a month, but maybe February at the earliest.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Great.
All right. Take care, everyone.
We will. Thank you, sir.
Great to talk to you.
Thank you. See you all, everyone, at
Bye-bye.
7:30. Bye, sir. Yeah.
যদি সবাই ফিরে যায় ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায় যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায় তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে যদি আলো না ধরে ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে যদি গান শুনে কেউ না আসে, তবে একলা চলো একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো।